Good morning. Good morning. So first, I just really want to begin by once again thanking everyone who helped to make last night's siyum such a beautiful and meaningful and overwhelming experience. A true kavod Torah, simchas Torah, and I hope that we all emerge from it feeling like we're really part of something very special. I mean, part of something very special and part of being such a beautiful chevra, being part of something very special in being part of a movement of Talmud Torah. I realized that there's one person I neglected to thank last night, which was, and we thank him at every single siyum, which was the Lubliner Rav, Rav Meir Shapiro of Lublin, who of course again as the father of the Daf Yomi, and a man who I've said many times did not merit to have his own biological offspring, yet each of us who learns the Daf has the opportunity to be one of his spiritual offspring. The Lubliner Rav has given us so much in our lives by having us do a blot of Gemara each and every day. For that, our lives are enriched, and Emir Hashem, his neshama should have an aliyah. So I will say, let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors, Shmuel Leba Dinovitz, for dedicating the shiurim this month in the zechus of an aliyah for the neshama of Shmuel's father, HaRav Peretz Avraham, Harav Benyamin Moshe Zichron. Our week of learning sponsors, Ira Miriam Grossman, in memory of Miriam's father, Ariyeh ben Moshe. Our Daf Yomi sponsor, Michael Judelson, commemoration of the Yahrzeit of Perry Judelson, Zichron, and Linda and Michael Elman, in the merit of, or I should say, in commemoration of the Yahrzeit of Rav Dovid Lifshitz ZT, the Slovalka Rav, whose Yahrzeit is today. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a neshama. I will say with that, let us begin. Shechianu v'kiyimanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh. Today we have the opportunity, no, not the opportunity, the privilege, and not just the privilege, an overwhelming, magnificent privilege to begin Maseches Kesuvos. Kesuvos is an incredible Masechta. Kesuvos is known as Shas Katan. Small Shas. Why? Because hafach ba v'hafach ba dekula ba. Anything and everything that you want to find in Torah, you will find in Kesuvos. So many different topics, many different subjects, halacha, hashkafa, agarata, incredible sugyas. It's all here. It's all here. So this is a really very, very, very exciting Masechta to begin. And I have to tell you, it is so beautiful. First of all, it's beautiful to welcome back some old faces who were here for previous Masechtas and now are back, Baruch Hashem. Zechus to welcome new faces. And I will say with that, let us begin. Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Besula Niseis Liyom Aravi. A Besula gets married ultimately on a Wednesday. Now, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, Takanas Chachomim Hi Shetinase Berevi'i B'Shabbos Kidin Farish Taima. So ultimately, again, we're going to see the concept. Now, again, like every Mishnah, we'll talk about the concepts, and then Amir Hashem will delve into them in the Gemara. So Besula also refers to, again, literally translated a virgin, a woman, first marriage, who's going to get married. There is a Takanas Chazal, that she should get married on a Wednesday. The almana, the yom and almana, a widow. Then I will say, we'll see ultimately again if widow means dafka widow, or perhaps widow means what? Widow means what? Anyone who's not a first marriage, and any second marriage and beyond, should get married on a Thursday. Why? What's the pshat? And I will say, this is going back on Besula. Shepamayim b'Shabbos batei dini yoshvin. Because for 2 days out of the week, Beis Din sits in session, ba'ayoros, in the cities, b'yom hasheni u'b'yom hachamishi, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So what's the pshat? What does Besula go? Sorry, Mondays and Thursdays. Excuse me. What does Besula getting married on Wednesday have to do with Beis Din sitting in session on Mondays and Thursdays? Shem hayelo tainas Besulim. If ultimately after getting married, a man has a claim against his wife that she's not a Besula, the next morning, in other words, they're getting married on Wednesday, he goes ahead and sees that she's not a Besula. Ultimately, he's able to take the matter to Beis Din on Thursday. So we'll say, let's take a look at Rashi over here. It says Rashi B'Sheni V'Chamishi. So first of all, Rashi says, Achos me'eser takanos shetikein Ezra babakam parak meruba. So we'll say this concept that Beis Din would sit in session on Mondays and Thursdays was one of the takanos of Ezra, one of the enactments of Ezra, 10 takanos. We're actually going to talk more about this later on in the Gemara. So Mefarish Kul Kach Tiknu Shetina Seberevi. So why did Chazal institute that a Basula should get married on a Wednesday? Listen to this. Shem Hayelo Tainas Basulim, because this way like this. Couple gets married on Wednesday. Ultimately, they consummate their marriage Wednesday night. If there is a claim from the husband against the wife that she's not a besula, so what's the halacha? Yashkim lebeis din be'od ka'aso alav. Ultimately, again, this way, Thursday morning he'll wake up and what? Go to Beis Din. Now, why Thursday morning? Because Thursday morning he's still upset. Now, both say, just understand, what does it mean he finds that she's not a besula? What does that mean? So what's the concern over here? The concern was adultery. Remember again, halacha l'maisa, we're going to see actually in today's daf that there was often up to a year between erisin and nisuin. Erisin and nisuin. Once a woman has erisin, again, which we'll discuss these stages, halacha l'maisa, she's a married woman, which means if she has a relationship with another man after erisin, even though after erisin, what's happened? What's happened? We've seen enough to know that halacha l'maisa, the man has given the woman an item of value. They are not yet living together, but they're married. So if she were to go ahead and have a relationship with another man, that is adultery. So the concern over here is, if Reuven marries Rachel, we can't get away from Reuven and Rachel. They're coming with us from Yavamas to Kesuvos now. So right, if Reuven marries Rachel, he thinks that she's a basula. They get married. It turns out she's not a basula. He doesn't know what's going on over here. What happened? Now, both said there could be many explanations for her not being a besula, or at least not having the physical signs of besula that don't have to do with adultery. We'll talk about that in the Gemara. But Lamaisa, again, at first blush, we're wondering what exactly happened over here. So this is, look at the lashon of Rashi, it's fascinating. So therefore, the Rashi explains that Chazal said, get married on a Wednesday. This way, if he doesn't find besulim, ba'od ka'aso alav, while he's still upset, ultimately, again, he'll go to Beis Din. We'll say, why? Otherwise, what are we concerned about? You see, if Beis Din is not open the morning after he gets married, what are we concerned? What are we concerned about? Says Rashi, he'll calm down. Now, both say, I want to point something out. Normally, calming down after you get angry is a good thing. Right? That's what we aspire to do. Here, the concern is that something may have happened. Something illicit and illegal may have happened. And ultimately, again, you cannot go ahead and afford for the husband just to overlook this. This matter has to be dealt with. I'll just point out 3 incredible lessons just from the opening statement of the Mishnah. Lesson number 1 is that sometimes new beginnings are difficult. Here's a good example of one, right? So let me say, it's important to expect turbulence with any new initiative in life. We often look at turbulence as a sign that something's wrong. I've gone down the wrong path. I've chosen the wrong way. Again, how does our Mishnah begin? Why? Because marriage or any other new life thing sometimes encounters speed bumps. And it's important to understand that. Lesson number two. I will say a person has to make sure that they do not become dulled to the negative things in life. I will say, I'll give you an example of this, and and then we're really gonna, because I was Makabel Yankees Musar last night about Ahmed Bays, right? So we're gonna spend. Thank you for doing it, Barabim. I appreciate that also. Right? So we're gonna. So I'll just mention this, which is always said. I'll tell you where this happens. Like sometimes, especially if you're a yeshiva guy, and maybe then again, you go to work, you get your first job, and you hear nivel peh, right? You hear someone say like just use really foul language, which unfortunately is often very common in the world. What's your first reaction? Like I worked in accounting for a couple of months, and I walked into an orientation. And I thought I was in a bar, literally, I could not. This is how this is how people talk. And it was just like, whatever. Yeah, you got it, right? It's wild. It's absolutely wild. But something amazing happens, which is the first time it's shocking, the second time it's jarring, The third time, it's upsetting, right? The fourth time, it's annoying. And the fifth time, you don't even hear it. It's the nature of being exposed to negative influences. That what happens is over time, my sensitivities drop. And over time, I'm not as spiritually alert to things as I once was. I will say it's incredible what Rashi's saying over here. Over here, what's the concern? What's the concern? That if the basula gets married on a Tuesday, he sees she's not a basula. So what happens? But Beis Din's not open until Thursday. So what are we concerned about? We're concerned he's just going to kind of like calm down. He'll take a deep breath. That was, I want to be clear, in every other area of life, calming down is good. Calming down is good. Here, what we're concerned about is, will the husband's sensitivities be dulled to the fact that something may have happened? Again, maybe something didn't happen, but Lamaisa, it's got to be dealt with. It's amazing how time dulls our sensitivity to the negative things in life. So accept the fact that there is sometimes this turbulence in the beginning, and I will say a person has to be ever vigilant to maintain proper Yiddish sensitivities, proper Jewish sensitivities, because often we're in a world where those sensitivities are not shared, and enough exposure to that world dulls the sensitivities. Keep your sensitivities at highest levels in order to maintain your Kedusha. So Rashi goes on, and Rashi says, I know there was number 3, but it's too late. It took the first 2 took too long. And so therefore again, Rashi explains over here, this was a Takanos Chazal. So Takanos Chazal is, Basula gets married on a Wednesday. This way again, if there's no Basulim, husband could show up at Beis Din on Thursday morning and immediately deal with the issue. So again, just to be clear, the absence of Basulim doesn't automatically mean adultery, but it requires an explanation. And if it's not adultery, then it has to be explained some other way as well. Good. We'll say that's the Mishnah. Mazel tov on completing the first Mishnah of Meseches Kesuvos. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yosef Ram Yehuda Shmuel, Mipnei ma Amar Besulini says the Amar Ravi. So we'll say this is a fascinating exchange. So Rav Yosef said the name of Rav Yehuda, the same name of Shmuel. So we'll say all of it said over the name of Shmuel. Why does a basula get married on a Wednesday? Lefi sheshaninu, because we learned. We'll say because we learned. We're going to see that this is on Memchesam Beis 48b, a couple of weeks. We'll see this in Meretz Hashem. I'm sorry. Lefi sheshaninu, because we learned. Higiuzman velo nisu. Ochlos mishula va'ochlos betruma. Shabbos said this is a fascinating case. Take a look at Rashi again. Higiazman v'lo nisu. Lekama beparak afal pi tnan nosin lebesula shnimasar chodesh mishetava habal vehizir ala nisu and lefarnes asa betachshitin ulefarnes ulaamana she'olumana shloshiyam. So let's listen to this. I alluded to this before. So it used to be that common practice was as follows. As soon as a couple got married, the kala would, for a besula, would be given 12 months to ready herself for marriage. 12 months. That was the established time frame. 12 months. Now, what would she do during those 12 months? Rashi already alludes to it over here. What would she do? She would go ahead and get herself ready with her tachshitin, her jewelry, everything else. Fine, 12 months. Now, both say, once 12 months elapses, the husband has an obligation to marry her, to now finish, do nisuin, to finish. To which says, what happens if a year goes by and husband doesn't marry her? Now we'll see why that is. Let's say he doesn't marry her. What's the halacha? Ochlos mishalova, ochlos betruma. So we'll say at that point in time, if he does not yet marry her, he assumes the responsibility for her support. It's fascinating. See, even though they have not yet had nisuin, but lamaisa, if a year goes by, he has not married her, he assumes responsibility for support. We'll say to the point that what? To the point that halacha l'maisa, if he's a Kohen, she could begin to eat truma. Now I will say, remember again, we learned this in Yevamis. At what point in time, technically, can the married woman begin to eat truma? At what point in time? Erison, excellent. Right? Erison, really. So why did Chazal say an arusa can't eat truma? Right? There are two possibilities, but we go with the possibility of the concern that maybe she's going to take it back to her father's home. Right? She's not living with her husband. She's going to take it back to her father's home. But midoraisa, once a woman has erison, she is permitted to go ahead and eat truma. So therefore, again, the Gemara says over here, if a year elapses and he doesn't marry her, he assumes financial support. Plus, if he's a Kohen, she can begin to eat truma. So the Gemara says, listen to this. So listen to this. What happens if the year falls out on a Sunday? So right, Ruvain does Erusin with Rachel. Good, Mazel Tov. They said a year from now for the Chasana. So now what is the Gemara teaching me? That if a year comes and year goes, halacha lemaisa, again, he has to support her. What happens if the year falls, the anniversary of Erusin falls out on a Sunday? Then I will say, what's our problem? The Mishnah has just said, Besula Niseis Liyom Revi, that a Besula has to get married on a Wednesday. But now a year has gone by and it's Sunday. What's the halacha? So you might have thought that even if the anniversary of Erusin comes out on a Sunday, now if he doesn't marry her on Sunday, he has to assume financial responsibility. No. Lekach Shanino, Besula Niseis Liyom Revi. Therefore, again, our Mishnah says, a Besula gets married on Wednesday. So I will say, what that means is, if the anniversary of Erusin falls out on Sunday, husband doesn't have to assume financial responsibility for his wife until when? Until when? Wednesday. In other words, if he fails to marry her by Wednesday, then even though they haven't yet had nisuin, halacha l'mais, he has to support her. Then I will say, here is the problem with this. So just to understand before we get to the problem, let's just understand what Shmuel just did. Shmuel just combined two concepts, right? Shmuel said, here's his question. Why does a basula get married on Wednesday? What's the importance of that halacha? And what he says is the importance of that halacha is something we're going to learn a Mishnah later on, where we talk about the idea that if a year goes by after Erusin, and husband hasn't done nisuin, he has to assume her financial responsibility. You might have thought that if the anniversary falls out on a Sunday, and he fails to marry her on a Sunday, he assumes that financial responsibility as well. Kamash malon. No, if the anniversary falls out on a Sunday, he actually gets a couple of extra days, and he won't be on the financial hook until Wednesday. Says the Gemara. It doesn't make any sense. Mari Davram. So we'll say, literally again, by the God of Avraham. We'll say, the God of Avraham is like a lashon that's used when someone is so profoundly bothered with a question. I would say I actually saw that the Sasemis brings down, why is it called Mari Davram? I will say Avram Avinu was the one in the world who asked the most burning question. What was the most burning question? He says, who runs the world? There has to be someone who runs the world, right? That was the question that bothered Avram Avinu to no end, that ultimately led him on his path to the Ribono Shel Olam. There must be a Balabira. There must be a master over the tower. Who runs the world? So the Sasemis brings down that when someone asks a question and they say, Mari Davram, by the God of Avraham, they mean like they have like such a big question on this. So Rav Yosef says, Mari Davram, Tali Tanya B'delo Tanya. I don't understand. Shmuel, what are you doing? You're going ahead and ascribing, literally again, a reason for something based on a reason given for something else. Or literally translated, it means you're giving a reason for something that has a reason that doesn't have a reason based on something that does have a reason. Let me just tell you what Shmuel's question is, then we'll see it. We'll say, here's what Shmuel's bothered by. Shmuel says, here's what Rav Yosef is bothered by. Shmuel is trying to say the reason why a basula gets married on Wednesday is why, or the reason the Mishnah says a basula gets married on Wednesday is why, according to Shmuel, to teach me about support, right? This is Shmuel's idea. The point of the Mishnah over here is a basula gets married on Wednesday to teach me that if the Erusin anniversary falls out on a Sunday, he's not held financially accountable until when? Until Wednesday. Comes on Rav Yosef, what are you talking about? Our Mishnah tells us why we get married on a Wednesday. And it has nothing to do with support. What does it have to do with? Beis Din. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, one second. Hi Tanya, so the Gemara says, Hi Tanya, Tali Tanya, Bidelo Tanya. You're going ahead and taking something that has a reason and using it ultimately to explain something that doesn't have a reason. Now the Gemara says, what does that mean? Hi Tanya, Lo Tanya. Which of these concepts is explained and which is not explained? Hatanya v'hatanya. Both of these concepts are saying. In other words, we're working with two concepts over here. Concept number one is the concept as espoused in our Mishnah, that a basula gets married on a Wednesday, so that if there is a tainas basulim, her husband could go to Beis Din on Thursday. And also the next Mishnah, another Mishnah on Mem Chesam and Beis, also talks about a reason, namely that halacha l'maaseh you have 1 year to get married, and if you don't go ahead and finish nisun within a year, you assume financial responsibility. So we have two concepts, both with their reasoning. Ela tali tanya de mefarish taima biditanya de lo mefarish taima. Rather, here's the problem, Rabosai. You're taking a statement on Memches and you're trying to read it into our Mishnah when our Mishnah itself has its own self-contained reasoning. In other words, the statement in our Mishnah has nothing to do with what occurs on Memches. The statement of our Mishnah is that a Basula gets married on a Wednesday, ultimately, again, because Beis Din is open on a Thursday morning. And if there's a Basulim claim, the husband could readily make it. That has nothing to do with what's discussed later on about the support obligation being triggered after a year. So if you're going to say something, here's what you have to say. Why is it that a Basula gets married on a Wednesday? Okay. So we'll say that's talacha. That's talacha. Why did Basula get married on a Wednesday? Because if there's some claim of Basulim, ultimately husband could go to the Beis Din Thursday morning. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, Rabbi say, Wednesday is not the only date for a marriage. What's also a good day to get married? Sunday. V'tinase be'echa b'Shabbos. Shem haylo tainus Basulim haya mashkim leBeis Din. So Rabbi say, get married on Sunday. Get married on Sunday. Right, then Lamaisa again on a Sunday you'll go ahead. Right, if there's a Tainus Basulim, Sunday night they consummate their marriage. If there's a Tainus Basulim, he'll go to Beis Din on Monday morning. So both says incredible. Shaktu chachamim al takanos benos Yisrael shetorech besuda shloshi yomim echa b'Shabbos v'sheni b'Shabbos ushlishi b'Shabbos u'berevi'i konsa. Now both say, listen to this. This is the lashon of shaktu. Shaktu means Chazal were concerned. They were concerned, right, that a Jewish woman should have a nice chasana. Rabbi says we're going to see the responsibility for preparing the chasana actually fell upon the chasan, fell upon the groom, right? So they wanted the groom to have 3 days to go ahead and prepare for the chasana. So Rabbi say, what's the problem? If you're going ahead and getting married on Sunday, what's going to end up happening, right? So the truth is you'll prepare whatever you can before Shabbos, right? And then you have Sunday. How much could you prepare in 1 day? In 1 day. So that's going to impact the quality of the food and the nature of the experience of the chasana. This is so beautiful. Chazal wanted a Jewish woman to have a beautiful chasana. So therefore they said what? Get married on a Wednesday. Because if you have Wednesday, then you have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Right? I should say, right? Echa b'Shabbos, Sheni b'Shabbos, right? B'Shabbos, Shlishi b'Shabbos, u'berevi'i konsa. Right? So you have 3 days. You have 3 days to prepare. And then ultimately, again, the chasana is on Wednesday. So I will say, so again, there's a whole bunch of stuff floating around over here. So here's what we have. So far, a Basula gets married on Wednesday. Why? Beis Din's open Thursday morning. If that's the case, get married on a Sunday. No, you can't get married on a Sunday. Why not? Shaktu chachamim. Chazal wanted a Jewish woman to have a nice wedding. You need a couple of days to prepare for a wedding. I'll say, by the way, it's incredible. People think they need weeks to prepare for a wedding. Apparently, Chazal said you need 3 days, right, to prepare for a wedding, right? 3 days to prepare for a wedding. So therefore, I will say, even though according to our Mishnah, Sunday should work for a chasana as well. There's another competing piece over here, which is we want chasanas to be nice and prepared for. You need 3 days. Fine. So that's why now we're getting married on Wednesday. Watch this. Shakdu. So both say, listen to this. Now that we said shakdu, so shakdu is the short term. Chazal wants a Jewish woman to have a nice wedding. So therefore they said get married on a Wednesday, not on a Sunday. Osa sheshaninu, that which we learned on Memches. Higias man velo nisu ochlos mishlava ochlos betruma. I will say, remember again, that's which we learn later on. That's what? That Allah lamaisa. A man has a year. I should say, a woman has a year to prepare for marriage. If after a year comes and husband doesn't do nisuin, what's the halacha? What's the halacha? He has to support her. Now I will say, watch this. Higias man be'echa b'Shabbos. What happens if the year falls out on Shabbos? So mitoch she'enu yochol be'echa b'Shabbos. Sorry, if the anniversary falls out. Sorry, on Sunday, mitoch she'enu yochol lichnos eino ma'ala lamazonos. I will say, therefore, again, halacha l'maisa. If the anniversary of the Irison falls out on a Sunday, since he can't get married on a Sunday, I will say, why can't you get married on a Sunday? Why not? Shakdu, one word answer, shakdu, right? Shakdu is what, again, is the term. Chazal want you to have at least 3 days to prepare for the chasana. So since you can't get married on a Sunday, therefore what? Eino ma'ale la mizonos. Halacha l'maisa, the support obligation is not triggered there as well. So I will say, so now everything comes together in a beautiful, beautiful picture. Say, here we go. So again, halacha number one, Basula gets married on a Wednesday. Why does Basula get married on a Wednesday? Beis Din's open Thursday morning. Using that logic, why doesn't the woman get married why don't you marry a Basula on a Sunday? Shaktu, right? Shaktu, good. So now that I have this model, this is very important because now a third halacha. What's the third halacha? And I will say, by the way, we're going to have, I realized I didn't put out, we don't have Kesuvos notebooks. Okay, Meretz Hashem, we'll get Kesuvos notebooks. So I will say it's kedai to just for the chaver that's new and for the chaver that's not new to write down or to take notes somehow of these concepts. These are things you remember daf to daf. So we'll say now third concept comes along. What's the third concept that comes along? Halacha l'maisa, woman has 1 year after Erisin to prepare herself. The husband has an obligation to execute on Nisuin on the 1 year anniversary of the Erisin. What happens if the 1 year anniversary of the Erisin falls out on a Sunday? What's the halacha? No support obligation until when? Until Wednesday. Beautiful. We'll say now we just rounded it out. We'll say now we're going to take a little bit of a detour with a fasting halachic discussion. So I will say, so again, kind of seizing on the concept that halacha l'maisa, if the anniversary of the Erisin falls out on a Sunday, even though now a year has elapsed, the support obligation is not triggered until Wednesday. Why? Because Chazal don't want Reuven marrying Rachel on a Sunday. Okay, that's Chazal don't want it. So watch this. Lefichach. So now we have a lefichach. Therefore, chalahu oshachal sehi. Let's say Reuven gets sick. So now it's the 1 year anniversary, right? 1 year anniversary. Let's make it easy. So the 1 year anniversary of Reuven and Rachel's Erisin, Mazel Tov, on the anniversary of your Erisin, is falling out on a Wednesday. Let's keep it easy. We'll say Reuven is sick. And he can't get married. Or Shechal Sehi, right? She's sick. Rachel's sick. Oh, Shepir Sanida. Or she becomes a Nida. And I both say, this is going to be very interesting because you look at this and you say to yourself, Shepir Sanida, therefore what? What, a woman can't get married when she's a Nida? So again, we're going to discuss that. This is actually the source of an incredible machlokes Rishonim about the concept of chupas Nida. Does chupas Nida work? Does it not work? Again, we're going to discuss. So don't worry about Nida right now as much. Just for now, for our purposes, let's group Nida together with choli, together with illness. Let's just call it extenuating circumstance, right? So now what happens? The year elapses, he becomes sick, she becomes Nida. What's the halacha? Eino ma'alala mazonos. Therefore, what do you see from here? That halacha l'maisa, if there's an extenuating circumstance that prevents them, which prevents them from getting married, what's the halacha? So the support obligation is not triggered. Then I will say, where does the Gemara get that from? Because the Gemara assumes, just like if the 1 year anniversary falls out when? On a Sunday, the support obligation is not triggered. Why? Because Chazal don't want you getting married on a Sunday. So you see from here that halacha l'maisa, anytime there's some external extenuating circumstance preventing you from getting married, halacha l'maisa, the support obligation is not triggered. So okay, what's true for a takanas Chazal will also be true for a personal ones. So now, Reuven's sick, Rachel's sick, they can't get married, their support obligation should be deferred as well. To which the Gemara said, others don't say this as a statement, but rather ask this as a question. Chalahu mahu. They will say, so what's talacha? So some ask a question, not as a statement, the alternate version. The anniversary of the Erisin comes about and it falls out on a Wednesday, and now Reuven is sick. So he can't come to the chasana. So does he have an obligation to go ahead and support her? What's talacha? Hasam. Shabbos say Hasam means in the case where the 1 year anniversary falls out on a Sunday, taimamai mishum da'anis. Shabbos say again, if the 1 year anniversary of the Erisin falls out on a Sunday, again, Chazal don't want Reuven getting married. So he's not going to get married. V'hacha, but Shabbos say in the case of the chola, hanami anis. It's also an ones. Secholi, Sunday, it's the same thing. They're both cases of extenuating circumstances which prevent the husband from executing on the nisuin. And therefore, Allah Chalmai said that should defer the support obligation, to which the Gemara says, O Dilma, Hasam anis pitakanta detakinu le rabanan, hacha lo. Or Rabbi say, no. The case of Sunday, Chazal are standing in your way. Right? Chazal are telling you, we don't want you getting married on this day. Okay, I'm ready to get married. Chazal don't want me to get married. Fine. And we'll say over here in the case of Choli, what can we say to that? What can we say to the husband or to the right? Come on, put on your big boy pants, right? Let's go, right? Just get to the chuppah, right? You're not feeling well, okay? Life is filled with moments you're not feeling well, right? Come on, get it together and let's go. Let's go. In other words, there's nothing standing in his way except him. Wow, what a profound yisod I was saying. See, there are different types of obstacles in life. Sometimes you encounter a takanas chazal. Sometimes you encounter a real obstacle. A real obstacle. There's something standing in your way. There's a barrier that's preventing you from moving forward. What do you do when there's a barrier, an absolute barrier from preventing you from moving forward? What do? You accept it, and then you pivot. You accept it, and then you pivot. There are other times where the barrier is choli. The barrier is illness. I will say, what do you do when the illness represents a self-imposed barrier? What do you do when there's a self-imposed barrier? Move through it. Power through it. Figure it out. So I will say that's the question of the Gemara. So in other words, do you assume that every onus and every extenuating circumstance is the same? Or no? There's a difference between when Chazal say no and when you're not feeling well. When Chazal say no, that's an active barrier, right? Therefore, no support obligation. When you're not feeling well, maybe the din is feel better. Let's feel better. Sometimes the answer is if you're not feeling well, feel better. To which the Gemara goes right there. And it will say, if you want to say that halacha l'maisa, if he's the one who is ill, then what? He's obligated to go ahead and provide. In other words, if the onus is him, then eino achinami, he has to provide her mazonos. Maybe then chol sehi mahu. What happens if she becomes sick? Rachel becomes ill. So what's the halacha? Matzi amar la ana ha ka'imna. So could Reuben say to her, look, I'm here, right? I'm ready to get married. If you're not going to get married, that's fine. I'm happy to respect your decision right now. But l'maisa, I'm not supporting you. Mom is just sweetheart, right? So I'll say, so this is a keeper, right? So again, I'm not supporting you. O Dilma, matzia amrele nistapcha sadeu. Or Rabbi say, this is incredible, right? You can see this conversation happening with a couple, right? She could say to him, it's your mazel that I'm sick, right? I'm your wife, we already had Erisin. Nistap chasadeh literally means your field has become flooded, which means what happens to me is a reflection of your mazel. Look at Rashi. Nistap chasadehu, last Rashi on the daf, mlashon mater sochif, nishtifa sadcha. Your field has become flooded. In other words, what happens when your field becomes flooded? It becomes ruined. Kilomar, mazalcha garam, ki mehayom ani mutelas alecha lazon. Rabbi say this is such a great line. What does the wife say to her husband? Right? It's your mazel that I'm sick. It's not me, right? It's your mazel that caused this. So in other words, what she's really saying is right now, I'm your problem. Right? So because I'm your problem, in other words, the year has gone by, so lemaisa now it's your mazel, and therefore you're obligated to support me. And if ultimately again, she's able to say nistapcha sadehu, your field has become flooded. In other words, if she says, if I become sick, it's your mazel, pirsa nida mahu. What happens if she becomes a nida? And I will say the Gemara is working under the assumption that you can't affect nisuin with a woman who is a nida. So what's the halacha? So b'shas vestaloti ba'ilacha. So I will say if she has what we call a veses kavua, a regular cycle, so she's becoming a nida at the regular appointed time. Loti ba'ilacha. Ultimately, again, it's not a kasha. Yankee, it's 6:27. 6:27. I got Talmud days. Not bad. Right? So the Gemara says, "Delo matzia amar l'stapcha sadeu." I would say, obviously, halacha l'maisa again, if what? If at the end of the day, it's a regularly anticipated cycle, then halacha l'maisa, that's her body working in the regular way. You can't go ahead and claim this tap chasadeh, your field has become flooded. So the Gemara says, Kiti barilacha, shelo b'shas vesta. So where does the machlokes? We always say, where could the issue come up? Let's say she becomes a nida at an irregular time. So the Gemara says, "Mai kevan de lo b'shas vesta havya matzia amrlein estap chasadeu." So could she say that since she's becoming a nida at an irregular time, it's your mazel? She says to her husband, "It's your mazel that's caused this. Oh, your field has become flooded. Oh, Dilma kevan de ika nashi de kamishanya vestaihu kishas vestadami." Or Rabbi say, do we say that? No, that halacha l'maisa, since there are women who have irregular cycles. Others will say, It is regular to be irregular. In other words, it's common that a woman has an erratic cycle, an irregular cycle. Kishas vesta dami. In other words, that's considered to be a normal occurrence. And she can't claim mistap chasadeu. So I will say, see here what the shaila is over here? The shaila is over in all of these cases. So here's what I know. I will say, it's always good to kind of operate. What do we know? What I know is that if the 1 year anniversary of their erisin falls out on a Sunday, what's the halacha? Right? There is no financial obligation that is triggered. It's pushed off until when? Till Wednesday. That's why? Because there's a takanas chazal that is preventing Reuven and Rachel from getting married. What's interesting now is, can we take that concept and apply it to any other extenuating circumstance that prevents the marriage from occurring? So do we say that whenever there's a roadblock, an extenuating circumstance that prevents Reuven and Rachel from getting married, that defers the financial obligation as well? So again, examples of roadblocks: he gets sick, she gets sick, she becomes a nida, but then you get into details. Regular cycle, irregular cycle. So that's the fundamental shaila. Can I take the concept of Yom Rishon and apply it to these other cases where there are extenuating circumstances preventing the couple from getting married, and say, just like if it falls out on a Sunday, ultimately, again, the financial obligation is deferred until Wednesday, so to any time there is an extenuating circumstance preventing Reuven and Rachel from getting married, that defers the financial obligation until couple is able to marry. So what's the answer? To which the Gemara says, I'll just mention, it's interesting to note that the wife says, when she says she gets ill or she becomes a nida, nistapcha sadehu. So I will say your field has become ruined. So she's referring to herself as a field. And she's giving the metaphor as a field. I will say it's very interesting to think about the field as a metaphor for marriage. Because I will say, what's the chap with the field? What's the chap with the field? The amount of effort you put in to taking care of that field is going to determine the output of that field. And I will say, what an incredible metaphor for marriage. See, the problem is often when it comes to shalom bayis, a spouse, people are looking to see what the other's going to do. What's the other's going to do? We'd have shalom bayis, we'd have a good marriage if you would only do this, and that. That might be true. But lamaisa, the first question a husband has to ask himself is, what am I doing to take care of the field? What am I doing to take care of the field? Because if the field is overgrown, right, and if the field is neglected, and the field doesn't get enough attention, and the field is not watered, and ultimately the field is not cared for, then lamaisa, the field produces nothing but negativity. But if a husband, if a wife are willing to invest, are willing to plow, to farm, to water, to take care of the field, then ultimately the field of marriage could produce the most beautiful peros. So the Gemara says, Pashat Rav Achai. So Rav Achai comes along and he says like this. He wants to answer the kasha. What's the kasha? Higiz man velo nisu ochlos mishlava ochlos betruma. So what says very interesting. So what did we say? What did I say before? Bless you. Higiz man velo nisu. If the time came, velo nisu. So we'll see the diak in this. What's the halacha? So a year goes by after erisin and they did not do nisuin. What's the halacha? The halacha is that triggers the support obligation. So the Gemara says, interesting, lo nasu lo katani, ella lo nisu. So I both say, here's what's interesting. Lo nasu is masculine. So see the way like you naturally read this particular statement is, they had erisin. If a year goes by and husband doesn't marry the wife, because I will say, remember again, generally marriage is husband driven. So if the year goes by and husband doesn't marry the wife, he has a support obligation. The Rav Achai comes along and says, it doesn't say lo nasu. It's not masculine. It's lo nisu. And Rashi points out over here, ela lo nisu, hein lebailim tala kava benashim. Shabbos say nisu also means feminine. Shabbos say the way to read this brisa, therefore, the way to read this mission, is if a year goes by and also she doesn't marry him, ultimately, again, the support obligation is triggered. So the Gemara says, what's the case of she not marrying him? So the Gemara says, Elo nisukatan, hechidami, what's the case? Idekama akvan inhi amai ochlos mishlava ochlos betruma. Now, if the wife is coming along and saying, I don't want to get married, right? So in other words, if a year goes by and she says, I'm not ready yet. So we'll say, if she's claiming she's not ready yet, then what? Why should the husband have a support obligation? Ella, what's the case? Ella lav de isnis ki hai gavna. Rather, it must be, Rabbi say, the case of lo nisu, where she did not marry him, but yet there's still a support obligation that's triggered as where? In a case of ones. Rabbi say, what's the case of ones? She gets ill. She gets sick. She gets sick, right? So a year goes by, husband is ready to go ahead and marry her. What happens? She ultimately is sick, and therefore she can't get married. What's the halacha? The Mishnah says, V'katani, ochlos mishalava, ochlos betruma. So Rav Achai says, you see from here that halacha lemaisa, if there is an ones that is triggered by her inability to get married, the support obligation still kicks in. Right? Again, higiyazman velo nisu. If a year goes by after Erisin, ultimately again, and they did not marry, ochlos mishalava, ochlos betruma, she is supported. So I will say, you see something very interesting. So according to Rav Achai, what the Mishnah is going to teach me is like this. While it is true that if the year falls out on a Sunday, right, ultimately again, Takanas Chazal prevents you from getting married on a Sunday, and therefore support obligation is not triggered until when? Until Wednesday. But Allah Chalamaysa, if the year anniversary comes, let's say the year anniversary falls out on a Wednesday, but she's sick, she can't get married, the support obligation is triggered. You see from here that if she has an ones, if she has an extenuating circumstance which prevents her from getting married, support obligation still kicks in. Amar Rav Ashi says no. Amar Rav Ashi, the olam emelacha, I would tell you, kol onsa lo achla, in reality, any ones. They both say the only time, right? Any ones, she's not going to get support, right? So in other words, Rabbi say, if halacha l'maisa, she's sick, the year goes by, she's sick, ultimately, again, there's no support obligation that's triggered. So I will say, what's the case? The case is where a year goes by. So I will say, so again, according to Rav Ashi is coming and arguing. Rav Ashi is saying that if the year goes by, he's ready to get married, and she says, I'm sick. He says, okay, I'm happy to wait for you, but there's no support obligation because you're the one preventing us from getting married. So said comes on Rav Ashi. So I will say, so ultimately again, so when is there a support obligation triggered, even in a case of ones? When he gets sick. Or he has an ones. Obedinu, watch this. Obedinu di by misni lo nasu. It really should have said lo nasu, right? Which means the masculine as well. It really should have said lo nasu. Va'aydi de tana reisha bididoi, tana nami seifa bididoi. But I will say, since the first Mishnah was quoted in the feminine, so too we use the feminine form of nisu as well, but don't be medayik in that. So I will say, fundamental machlokes, Rav Ashi and Rav Achai. When there is an ones, ultimately again on the part of the woman, does that trigger a support obligation? Rav Achai says yes, if there's an ones, she still gets support. Rav Ashi says no. But Abba said what everyone seems to agree with is what? That if the ones is mitzad the husband, right? If the husband has an extenuating circumstance which prevents him from getting married, what's the halacha? The support obligation is triggered. Rabbi say, how do we paskin? Because this is incredibly important. How do we paskin halacha l'maisa? Rabbi say, again, here's what we have so far. So let's go through what we've got. We've got number one, Basula gets married on a Wednesday. Why? Beis Din, right? We also know Basula doesn't get married on Sunday. Why? Shaktu, right? Now we'll say the question is, what about onsin? What happens if an oni situation arises which prevents the couple from getting married? Is the support? I'm sorry. One more Allah. We also know that after Erisin, a woman is given 1 year to ready herself for marriage. If after the year comes and they don't get married, husband has a financial obligation to support her. She even needs truma. The shaila is, what happens if the year goes by, they don't get married because of an ones? His ones, her ones, what does or what doesn't trigger the financial obligation? So Rabbi say, here's the halacha. In Hilchos Ishus Perek Yud, halacha Yutes in the Rambam. Higiyaz mach nasnu leish v'lo nasa, nischay b'mzono se'af api shelo kanas. Rabbi say, if the year lapses, and husband did not yet marry the wife because of his ones, ultimately again, he is chayiv to support her. So Rabbi say, so again, now the case over here is, right, v'lo nasa, shouldn't say ones. Year goes by, he didn't marry her, is chayiv to support her. Again, if the year falls out on a Sunday or on a Friday, ultimately again, he has no, we defer the support obligation. Now watch this. V'chenim chalahu, shepir sanida, kishegia hazman eno ma'ale la mezonos. So I will say, the Rambam paskins, that Allah l'maisa, the presence of any ones, his ones, her ones, ultimately, again, defers the support obligation. That's how the Rambam paskins. Any ones defers the support obligation. Beautiful. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, this is great. So wow. Here we go, Boss saying. Here we go. Here's what's interesting. We were just speaking about the idea that halacha l'maisa, and we just saw in the Rambam, that if there is an ones, right, an ones situation, ultimately ones defers the financial obligation of the husband towards the wife. Comes along Rava, and Rava says, by gittin, it's not the case. Meaning what? Alma kasava Rava, ein ones begittin. They both say there is no claim of extenuating circumstances when it comes to a get. So what's the case? We'll say, here we go. No claim of own sin by a get. Where does Rava know this? That ein, or we'll say, and this is the phrase, ein ones begin. You can't claim extenuating circumstances when it comes to a get. What's the case? So we'll say, here we go. This nan, if halacha, a man gives his wife a get, he's going away, right? He's leaving. He goes away, and he says, this is your get, if I don't return within 12 months. And we'll say, what happens? And he dies. He dies within the 12 months. What's the halacha? Ain't no get. It's not a get. Then I will say, the reason it's, why isn't it a get? Why isn't it a get? Because he's dead. Right? Lemaisa, again, remember, ein get la'achar misa, which you cannot deliver a posthumous get. Right? You can't go ahead and do that. So if he died within the 12 months, it's not a get. To which the Gemara says, Meisu de eno get. And I will say, interesting enough, if he's dead, it's not a get. Hachala, I will say, watch this. What happens if a man gives his wife a get, and he says, listen, this is your get if I don't return within 12 months. And what happens, I will say? He gets sick, and he's bedbound. Right? And as a result, he can't make it back. What can you infer from this Gemara? What can you infer from the Mishnah? The Mishnah, right? The Gemara says, Meisu de eno get, hachala harei get. But I will say, ultimately, again, if he was sick and unable to come back, what would happen? The get would still be chal. And I will say, what do you see from there? Ein ones begittin. The husband could claim, what do you mean I'm sick? What do you want from me? I would come back. I'd love to come back. I want to come back. I'm bedbound. You see from here that what? That Allah Chalamaisa, the taina of ones, doesn't remember. We say to him, Reuven, you back, you're not back. You back, you're not back, right? I got the whole Torah. You've got whatever strain you have, right? I understand. You can't come back. You can't do this. You can't do that. Fine. Lamaisa, you're not back. The fact that you're not back ultimately triggers the get. So you see from here, says Rava, ein ones begin. You can't claim extenuating circumstances by gin. So you says, 1 second. The get. I don't know. Maybe you could infer it differently. Maybe the truth is, even if he got sick, and that's the reason he didn't come back within 12 months, maybe also it's not a get. Maybe he can claim own sin. To which the Gemara says, "V'higufa kamash malon de'ein get la'achar misa." And we will say the point of the Mishnah, the real point of the Mishnah is that halacha l'maisa, you can't give a posthumous get. Right? That's the point. We're not really, in other words, don't infer anything from here about own sin. See, I will say, halacha l'maisa, really the focus is just that case. Reuven gives Rachel a get, so if I don't come back within 12 months, ultimately, again, you're divorced. Here's your get. What happens? He dies. He dies month number 6. What's the point of the Mishnah? She's an almana, she's not the grusha. Right? There's no get achar misa. That's the point. And don't infer anything else. To which the Gemara said, ain't get la'achar misa, hatana l'reisha. We already learned that concept of ain't get la'achar misa. Where did we learn it from? I will say this is incredible. Harei zegitech meisi, harei zegitech mecholizeh, harei zegitech la'achar misa, lo amar klum. But we already learned this explicitly. If a man says to his wife, right, this is your get when I die from this illness, right? Or this is your get after I die. And I will say, by the way, this is a perfect thing. You think to yourself, I don't understand. She's going to be an almana anyway, right? I will say, remember again, why would a man be doing this? Yibum, right? He does not want her to have to deal with the yavam. So he's trying to do a nice thing. After I love you, I don't want to be divorced from you. So this is your get after I die. What's the halacha? I will say in all of these cases, lo amar klum. At the end of the day, it doesn't work. I will say, why doesn't it work? Because there's no such thing as a post-death get. Now we'll discuss ways to structure this, but there's no such thing. So we'll say, so again, we already learned that halacha explicitly. To which the Gemara says, Dilma lafokim mid Rabbeinu. The sanyu of Rabbeinu hitiru linas. I will say maybe this has come to exclude the position ultimately again of the Rabbanon, because the Rabbanon said that halacha lamaisa, you're permitted to go ahead and get remarried with such a get. Rabbi saying, now take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, hitiru linas, below chalitza lahahid de'imlo basi. Rabbi said, listen to this, is fascinating. The Chazal, the Rabbanon said in the case where Reuven gives Rachel a get, and he says to her, this is your get if I don't come back within 12 months. And he dies. So we said before, ultimately it's not a get, she's a widow, she's not an agrusha. The Rabbanon say such a get is actually a valid get. How so? Who are the Rabbeinu? Ultimately, again, this was the same Beis Din that permitted the use of the olive oil of idolaters. Rabbi say there was originally again a halacha that said you can't use the oil, the shemen zayis, right, the olive oil of a nachri, of an akum, and they dialed that back. We'll get into that why. There's Gemara Masechus Avodah Zarah. So Rabbi say, so why would the Rabbanon allow this get to be used? Savar Rabbi Yossi da'amar zmano shel shtar mochiach halav. Ultimately, again, because they hold the Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi says it's fascinating. Look, Rabbi Yossi, that ultimately the date in the get shows you what his intention is. Rabbi said, listen to this. Fascinating. When Reuven goes away, he goes overseas. He says to his wife, if I don't come back within 12 months, ultimately, again, this is your get. Rabbi said, he dates the get. When you date the get, what's Reuven's kavanah? Now, we'll see. Zman, you always have to date a get. But the Gemara says, what's the kavanah with the Zman? The kavanah is a retroactivity clause. That's what he's doing. What he's saying is, if I don't come back after 12 months, this get is chal as of when? As of the date in the get. I will say, based on that, halacha l'maisa, even if Reuven dies sometime during the 12 months, if he doesn't come back after 12 months, I will say, what's the halacha? The get is retroactively chal from the date that is in the get. And this is not considered to be what? A posthumous get. It's not a get la'achar misa. It's a get that's retroactively chal from the time that he left town. So I will say, we'll stop over for today, but it doesn't say what we're stopping in the middle of. We're stopping in the middle like this. So I will say, we totally transitioned. We started with marriage, we ended with divorce, started with Sulanises, now we're up to Gittin. So I will say, here's what's happening over here. Rava said, when it comes to the support obligation, you could make a claim of ones. That works. We saw the Raman Paskins that way. That halacha l'maisa, if there is an ones which is preventing you from getting married, halacha l'maisa, that defers the support obligation. Rava comes along and says that might be true by support obligation. It's not true by get. There is no claim of onsin by a get. What we call ein ones begin. So if you don't fulfill a Tanayan get because of an onus and extenuating circumstance, we don't care about that. We throw out such a claim like that. We thought that we had the source of Rava's statement. We don't yet have it. And Meretz Hashem, in tomorrow's daf, we'll see where Rava gets this concept of onus begin. Rabbi say, Mazel Tov on the haschala of Maseches Kesuvos. Shkoyach.